DW News live from Berlin. The end of an era. One of Africa's most polarizing leaders, Robert Mugabe, has died at the age of 95. For some, the former president of Zimbabwe was a freedom fighter. For others, a brutal dictator. We'll look at his complex legacy and ask how people in Zimbabwe are likely to remember him. Also coming up, the death toll from Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas will be staggering, the country warns, as search and rescue efforts continue. Thousands of people are missing, with tens of thousands more in desperate need of aid. Plus, two longtime rivals battle it out in the Euro qualifying rounds. Tonight, Germany take on the Netherlands. I'm Sumi Somaskanda. Thank you for joining us. Zimbabwe's former president, Robert Mugabe, has died at the age of 95, nearly 2 years after being forced to resign. Mugabe was Zimbabwe's first post-independence leader, and many remember him as the country's liberator. But during almost 4 decades in office, he ruled Zimbabwe with an iron fist, crushing dissent and laying waste to the economy. In a moment, we'll hear what life was like under Mugabe's regime. But first, this look at his complex legacy.
Robert Mugabe's political career began in the 1960s with the formation of a radical anti-colonialist movement dedicated to fighting white minority rule. After Zimbabwe became independent in 1980, elections were held and Robert Mugabe's ZANU party won by a landslide. Mugabe became the country's first black prime minister, striking a tone of reconciliation and forgiveness despite his militant past. But hopes for a peaceful political transition weren't fulfilled. Political tensions and violence between Mugabe's supporters and political opponents persisted. Government forces were responsible for killing thousands of civilians. During the 1980s and early 90s, Mugabe was a welcome guest around the world. But by the mid-1990s, the once venerated freedom fighter was attracting international criticism for his increasingly autocratic rule. White farmers were driven from their land by Mugabe's supporters. Dissent was violently quashed. Opposition leaders were intimidated and beaten.
There will never be a regime change here. There will always be the people of Zimbabwe in control.
But the people of Zimbabwe suffered under his rule. When Mugabe ordered a purge of Zimbabwe's slums, entire neighborhoods were razed to the ground, and up to 1 million people made homeless. Economically, Mugabe ruined Zimbabwe, a country that had once been Africa's breadbasket. While his people were starving, Mugabe celebrated his 91st birthday with a lavish party, costing a reported $1 million. He once said that only God could remove him from office. But in the end, Robert Mugabe's insatiable will to power proved his undoing. After firing his vice president, Emerson Mnangagwa, to install his wife, Grace, as his second in command, the military intervened.
Good morning, Zimbabwe.
In a de facto coup, they placed Mugabe under house arrest. After 37 years in power, he was forced to step down, sparking celebrations in the streets of Harare. Some, especially in Africa, will honor Mugabe's legacy in the fight against white oppression. But many around the world will remember him as the continent's most notorious dictator.
And And joining us from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, is Tendai Biti. He is the vice president of Zimbabwe's opposition party, MDC, and he served as the country's finance minister from 2009 to 2013. Mr. Biti, thank you for joining us here on DW. First of all, what does the moment of Robert Mugabe's passing mean for Zimbabwe?
Well, it's quite clearly the end of an era. It's quite clearly the closure of a chapter. There's no question that he was a giant of the liberation struggle. There's no question that he was an icon, and for that respect, ordinary average Zimbabweans owe him a gratitude. But there's also no question that he was this coalition of contradictions. There's no question that he single-handedly was responsible for much of the destruction that we've seen in the 38 years up to 2017. The massacre and genocide of people between 1982 and 87, when 30,000 people were killed. The torture of some of us, I was tortured in 2008, and so forth, the destruction of our economy, and the creation of contradictions that ultimately removed him from office. Zimbabwe is what it is right now, a tattered, broken, failed state, thanks largely to Robert Mugabe and his system of predation, of patronage that he presided over. So yes, today is a day of mourning, but we have no illusions about the man who just died in Singapore.
Mr. Biti, I have to ask you about your role in his legacy, because from 2009 until 2013, you were Robert Mugabe's finance minister, and we have a picture here showing you that we're looking at right now with Mr. Mugabe. Do you feel in any way responsible for failing to clean up the corruption that you say is still plaguing the country after serving as finance minister?
Well, I think the context you need to put is that that government was a coalition government. So my leader was Morgan Tsvangirai. So it was a coalition between Mugabe's party and Morgan Tsvangirai's party. So I served in a government with him under Morgan Tsvangirai. We did our best. We stabilized the economy. We grew the economy. What we did, we showed Zimbabweans what it would mean to run the economy correctly. So we have no regret to working with Mugabe. The one thing I want to draw your attention is that during our days in government, there was always a contradiction between Mugabe, the dictator, Mugabe who had tortured us, and Mugabe, the chair of that cabinet, this unflappable general who chair our cabinet meeting, would hardly get cross. It was a contradiction in character. It pretty much illustrates and captures the contradiction that Mugabe was. On one hand, this soft, great Pan-Africanist liberator, and on the other, is the huge fascist dictator, a contradiction in terms that he will take to his grave.
Okay, Tendai Biti, the vice president of the opposition MDC party, served as the country's finance minister under Robert Mugabe from 2009 to 2013. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. Let's take a look now at some other stories making news around the world. Opposition parties in the UK have agreed not to back Prime Minister Boris Johnson's plans for early elections. Johnson wanted to send voters to the polls just before Britain is due to leave the European Union on October 31st. The move sets up a showdown over whether Brexit goes ahead on that date. Pope Francis has denounced corruption among political and business leaders in Mozambique. At a rain-soaked mass in the capital, Maputo, the pontiff said it was paradoxical that great numbers of people in the East African country live in poverty, despite Mozambique's abundant natural resources. Sudan's newly appointed Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has announced his cabinet. It is the first since the military ousted President Omar al-Bashir in April. It includes 4 women and is part of a power-sharing agreement between the military and the pro-democracy movement. Hamdok's priorities include tackling the ailing economy and reaching peace with armed groups. And in Yemen, thousands have taken to the streets of Aden in support of the United Arab Emirates. The UAE launched airstrikes on Saudi-backed government forces last week in support of separatists who have seized the city in a power struggle with the government. The rally comes as Saudi Arabia hosts talks between both sides. In the Bahamas, the government is warning that the death toll from Hurricane Dorian will be staggering. At least 30 people are confirmed dead, but thousands are missing. While Dorian is now threatening the U.S. states of North and South Carolina, an international humanitarian effort is underway to help those affected in the Bahamas. The UN estimates that 70,000 people are in immediate need of aid.
Under this rubble lie homes obliterated, lives cut short. The extent of Hurricane Dorian's havoc is slowly beginning to emerge here, and so too stories of survivors clinging on.
Whatever water, we have one jug, we have to share. We have one spoon rice, we have to share. We have one cigarette, we have to share. That's where we live and we have survived.
Others here are frantically trying to get out. The airport departure lounge is overwhelmed.
They told us that the babies, the pregnant people, and the elderly people were supposed to be first preference. We still have babies here. We still have elderly people here. So they're not living up to their word.
Some 70,000 people here need water, food and medicine urgently. They used to refer to Abaco as a slice of heaven. Now, the people who call it home fear it's finished.
Oh, it can take a long, long time. Nothing is impossible, but it can take a lot to recover. Because we lost, you see, it's about 100%, devastating all over.
On neighbouring Grand Bahama, it is every bit as bleak. The road to shelter here is littered with tales of hope.
Thanks, guys.
And of heartbreak.
Slept in the ceiling for 2 days. Got 8 feet of water in my house. And right now I'm heading into the city of Freeport for refuge. So keep us in prayer, be Bahamas strong.
Everywhere, reminders of those who couldn't escape. Recovery workers measure the cost in bodies. A moment's rest interrupted by the discovery of yet another victim. Little wonder that officials here are preparing for mass casualties.
In last weekend's 2 regional elections in eastern Germany, the country's mainstream parties managed to hold on to power, but only just. The far-right AfD made large gains, emerging as the second most powerful party in both Brandenburg and Saxony. Observers say this underscores an increasing political polarization. In the first opinion poll since those elections, Germans were asked what issues they are most worried about. And number 1 is the concern that German society is drifting apart. 83% say they are worried about a divided society. Second place here is climate change. 76% saying they are concerned that climate change will destroy their livelihoods. And 52% are worried about a growing influence of Islam in Germany. Let's speak to Reinhard Schlinkert. He is the head of the polling institute Infratest DMAP, and he's with us to shed some light on these numbers. So 83% are worried about social cohesion. What is behind those fears?
Yeah, quite interesting, since everybody seems to be happy in Germany concerning their own financial and overall economical situation. But when it comes to their fears, they think about integration, education, and you find that in all age groups. And what worries most, that the differences between cities and the plain countryside are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And especially in education, more and more private schools are created here in Germany, since many people are very unhappy with the educational system run by the state.
All right, let's take a look at some more numbers. Infratest DMAP also asked Germans about Chancellor Angela Merkel's coalition between her conservative CDU-CSU bloc and the Social Democrats. And 3/4 agree that the government promises a lot but doesn't deliver much. And satisfaction with the government definitely looks different. But nevertheless, 61% of respondents want the coalition between the Conservatives and the Social Democrats to continue governing until the next regular elections in 2021. Chancellor Angela Merkel remains highly respected in Germany. 58% of respondents agree that she is the main reason that Germany is doing pretty well, despite all the crises in the world. But a significantly large number, we should say, 40%, disagree. So many Germans trust the Chancellor as trust Angela Merkel to be Chancellor, but 40% are not satisfied with her government on a whole. So what does that mean?
Well, living in Germany, every week or every month, you have a new headline. The surplus in the budget is 50 billion, 40 billion, 60 billion. All countries and all cities have a surplus, and people think, okay, that's great. What is the money used for? We don't get it. We don't have any own financial aid, and they're eagerly waiting that this so-called solidarity extra tax, which was created to help East Germany to be built up, the government announces that this will be abolished within the next year for 90% of the population. And I think then people will feel that also that money from this high tax incomes will also arrive at their own bank accounts.
Well, let's take a look now at another set of numbers. Every month, Germans are asked which party they would vote for if a general election were to take place the following Sunday. And we can take a look at that now. The governing CDU-CSU bloc is at 27%. Their current coalition partner, the Social Democrats, at 14%. The far-right AfD is 15% here. The business-friendly FDP coming in at 7%, as is the Left Party. The Greens are on 23%, down 3 points compared to last month. So the Greens' popularity has been falling down 3 percentage points from August. Is it safe to say that they have peaked?
The absolutely hype for the Green Party took place in summer, in July and August, when temperatures in Germany reached up to 42 degrees, so everybody could feel that there is a climate change. And it was only the Green Parties only who said we have to take measures. Now, since it's getting cooler again, and since the results of the Green Party in Eastern Germany were, 10, 11, 9%, and so not sensationally high, the hype about the Green Party in Germany has decreased, and let's wait for the winter.
All right, Reinhard Schlinkert, head of the polling institute Infratest DMAC. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Now, President Vladimir Putin of Russia is seeking to boost his country's investment in his country as he meets the leaders of Japan and India today at an economic forum in Vladivostok. Economic sanctions imposed by the EU and the US after the Russian annexation of Crimea mean that Moscow is looking to the east to find new friends.
Russia, India, and Japan at the Eastern Economic Forum. This judo tournament is entertainment for the world leaders here. But one of the key discussions at this summit is how to end a territorial dispute between Japan and Russia, which began in 1945.
Let us conclude a peace treaty and unleash in one fell swoop the unlimited potential that the people of our two countries hold. A link between Japan and Russia would transform the entire region. It would change the world significantly.
Putin, himself a well-known practitioner of judo, refused to commit to that. But with India's Narendra Modi offering to invest $1 billion in Russia, that search for new friends is going well.
President Macron recently said the leadership of the West is ending. And I cannot imagine an effective international organization that works without India or China.
It's certainly a narrative that Russia wants to push. And despite historic disputes with Japan, the two countries are strengthening their economic ties. While they may have their disagreements behind closed doors, in public they're currently on the same side.
Meanwhile, Russians will vote in regional elections across the country this weekend, but critics are already saying the vote won't be free or fair. They accuse local governments of keeping opposition candidates off the ballots. Opposition supporters have held a wave of protests in the run-up to the vote. Much of the focus has been on elections in the capital, Moscow, which has seen the biggest police crackdown on protesters in nearly a decade. DW's Yuri Rishetto reports.
This is the Mosgor Duma, Moscow's city parliament. Elections are just around the corner and the fight for a seat in parliament has been the fiercest Moscow has ever seen.
It all began in July when practically no opposition candidates were allowed to run for election. Not even Yulia Galyamina of the Yabloko party, allegedly due to a technicality. Dozens of other candidates experienced similar problems. This has outraged their supporters. For weeks there were protests like here with 20,000 taking part at the beginning of August.
The fact that not a single opposition candidate got through is something we really didn't expect. That's quite foolish politically. If I were on the other side, I would never have allowed a development like that.
But she was allowed to run for office with no problems. Valeria Casamara positioned herself from the very outset as a loyal supporter of incumbent Mayor Sergei Sobyanin and as someone who knows how to score points with voters.
The people are concerned about their daily lives running smoothly, about the replacing of trees that have been cut down in their yards, about their neighbourhoods staying safe, about improvements in their standard of living, and they want relations with authorities to be trustworthy.
But that reliable relationship with public authorities only benefited candidates loyal to the government. The opposition turned to protests even when the city refused to issue them the permits. The result? More than 2,000 arrests, many of which took place here on Pushkin Square in downtown Moscow.
The police acted rigorously and at times brutally. Among the arrested were innocent passers-by, minors and journalists. Most were released after several hours, but some remained behind bars for weeks, such as Yulia Galyamina. She was in custody for 33 days.
The system forces us to take to the streets. Our media is controlled. We're not allowed to take part in the elections. All we have left is the streets in order to make our ideas public. Even that's restricted.
I'm categorically against the opposition provoking the authorities while remaining closed to dialogue, but instead organising demonstrations that are not approved and during which innocent people have to suffer.
Just like the candidates, a rift has formed between Muscovites who support the current system and those who want change. But that conflict is unlikely to influence the outcome of this weekend's election.
The election results are basically already clear after the exclusion of most of the independent candidates.
Football now, and it is the standout match of the Euro qualifiers. Tonight, two of Europe's most talented football teams and longtime rivals face off. Germany is hosting the Netherlands in Hamburg.
Germany coach Joachim Löw has played up his young team's closeness ahead of their match with the Netherlands. But with Bayern's Leon Goretzka out injured, there's been a break in the chain.
It's a real shame. I know from experience, when there was a bit of a break for the team in 2010, that they need to play with more or less the same starting lineup. Over 8, 10 or 12 matches, without too many changes.
Dutch coach Ronald Koeman seems to have no problem switching up his young side. In his 10 matches in charge, he's never named the same lineup in 2 consecutive games. Like Germany, the Netherlands are also emerging from a difficult patch.
We in Germany are sometimes stronger and sometimes weaker, and that also has to do with the quality of the rival.
These two great rivals should fight it out for top spot in Group C. Germany had the upper hand thanks to a 3-2 win earlier this year in Amsterdam. The last time they lost at home to the Dutch was all the way back in 2002.
Now, this weekend marks the 90th anniversary of the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. This year's race has received a welcome boost. Organizers have confirmed Monza will stay on the Formula One calendar until at least 2024. And for one of the sport's most famous teams, 90 is also a special number this week.
Such a sea of red is usually only reserved for the racetrack. It was on Ferrari's 90th birthday, fans crammed into Milan's Cathedral Square. They'd come to catch a glimpse of some Ferrari legends, past and present. Of course, these drivers would have been nothing without the machinery behind them, so some classic Ferraris were on show too. These fans will be heading 30 kilometres up the road this weekend to Monza to see if Charles Leclerc can follow up his maiden F1 win in Belgium last Sunday.
Looking back, obviously, I'm very happy that this first win is done. It's always difficult to do this first step, but once you do it, it takes quite a bit of weight out of your shoulders.
Leclerc has outshone his more senior teammate Sebastian Vettel at times this season, picking up the team's only win so far. Some have touted him as Ferrari's future #1 driver.
It was clear to see that he has a lot of potential. I think he had a very strong rookie season with Alfa. I think it's good to see that he's, right on the pace straight away. And obviously, from a team point of view, I think the most important is that we work together, not against each other.
Monza's quick straights will suit the Ferraris of Vettel and Leclerc. Capturing a win on home soil would certainly be a dream birthday present for these fans.
Coming up next on DW News Asia, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is in China on her 12th visit as leader. We look at how she's balancing trade expectations with human rights concerns. And the impact of the security lockdown in Kashmir. Medical services have been hit hard since the Indian government stripped the region of its special status. Virish Banerjee has those stories coming up on DW News Asia and much more. Don't forget to get the latest headlines. Follow us on Twitter. Our handle there at DW News. For all of us here in Berlin, thank you for watching.
Others can deliver food to your door, but can they bring fist bumps and high fives? Can they cause mini stampedes? Bring you instant hero status? Or turn back time with the turn of a knob? Others can bring you food. We bring you a little more. Delivering happy. McDonald's on Uber Eats.
We've been told that perfect mornings exist for the lucky few. That morning people own the waking hours. But the truth is, mornings belong to all of us. And while your morning might look like this, or even this, your mornings are what you make of them. All it takes is saying yes. Starbucks Morning Yes.
That's the bell ringing on Wall Street right now, and yep, that means the US markets are open. And of course, we are live across the globe. Happy Friday, everybody. Hoorah, we made it, but we have time. We've got some time for the money news that matters. I'm Aaron Hazelhurst, and this is Talking Business. Hey, let's take a look at the top story. The US jobs engine, it cooled in August. Just another sign that the world's biggest economy could be weakening. 130,000 new jobs were created last month, much less than expected, with hiring slowing across American industry. Hey, we're going to go live to New York to hear from our very own, Samira Hussein, who'll take us through the numbers and give us the lowdown on the current shape